Hey guys, welcome to the Bill Barnwell Show. I am Bill Barnwell. Before we get started today, just wanted to let you know that if you are listening to the show in your podcast feed or your favorite podcast download and listening device, you can also now check out this show on YouTube. Yes, we are the first podcast, I believe, to have the idea to put the audio podcast on YouTube. You can do that and watch me talk to my guests each and every week, as I am about to do right now with my friend from the Snaps and Stats newsletter, breaking down these two Monday night games, I would say like maybe a B plus, maybe a C plus game in terms of what we saw on Monday night here in this first doubleheader of the season. Joining me to do that is the excellent Dan Pizzuta. Dan, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm properly caffeinated after a double Monday night doubleheader. Like you said, entertaining enough games. I think that'll get us through. So I'm doing well.
Yeah, not blowouts. Definitely some things to discuss here with both of these games. But as we're recording this at 1:10 in the morning here on the East Coast after the Raiders-Chargers game finished, certainly a little bleary-eyed. But we're going to push through, like I said, some interesting stuff to discuss, some curious decisions, some very odd quarterback play maybe in some places. And I guess I want to start there. I want to start with the game we just finished. Raiders-Chargers. Chargers win 20-9. An excellent defensive performance from the Los Angeles Chargers, which should probably be no surprise. But what I do want to start with, Dan, is I think this was really sort of a, like people were talking about it like the film nerd Super Bowl, like the Justin Herbert, Geno Smith, all 22 Super Bowl. And we didn't get that. We got sort of an inconsistent, iffy game from Justin Herbert. Let's talk about him in a minute. But first, this was a really bad Geno Smith performance. And I think really frustrating given that we saw him play well in week one. They had opportunities in this game. It wasn't like they were, getting blown out for the entire game. It was relatively close for a good chunk of the contest. But I really just found it frustrating to see how often he was missing open receivers throughout this game.
Yeah, it was a mix of missing open receivers and then also not having open receivers at all, which
part of it, yes,
is, I think it played into it a little bit. I think looking at per next gen stats right now, it's 33.3%, so a third of his passes were into a tight window, which next gen has as a yard or fewer of separation. So I think it was one of those things where the Chargers just weren't really afraid of anything that the Raiders could do in the passing game, especially I think we'll get to like the Brock Bowers lack of impact, I think, while he was on the field. So I think this Chargers defense was really good, just kind of sitting on everything. I think Geno went 0 for 11 on passes of 10 or more yards down the field. So that's not the Geno Smith we know. So I think it was just one of those things where the Chargers were able to sit on everything, and it made it as difficult as possible for the Raiders. And then anything easy, Geno also wasn't hitting either.
Yeah, it's just so odd because, especially with Brock Bowers not at 100%, and he did play the vast majority of this game, had sort of his typical role, but nothing explosive, a lot of underneath stuff, some third down conversions, but only a handful of catches for Brock Bowers. It did feel like maybe the one thing they could lean on a little more was more Trey Tucker and more Dante Thornton, both of whom were legitimate, two of the fastest guys in football, speedsters, over-the-top players, just to scare the Chargers in this game. But like you said, they were breaking out stuff at the sticks. It wasn't like they were really concerned about getting beat over the top. And they do have, Derwin James, who was awesome in this game as usual, but he's not playing free safety every single play or close to it. I mean, there were really no concerns from the Chargers. And that even happened after they lost Khalil Mack early in this game to an elbow injury. So I guess I wonder, looking at what Chip Kelly called in this game, they did try to get the run game going early. It did not work in any way, shape, or form. We'll talk about Ashton Jeanty in a minute, but do you think there was anything the Raiders could have done to maybe make life easier for Geno? Or do you think this was just the reality of when they don't have the Brock Bowers, who's the best tight end in football, or the best receiving tight end in football, there's not really an alternative that works for them?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And like you said, Brock Bowers played his normal amount. And yes. I think that that might be my question, to be honest, is why he was playing that much if he wasn't going to be Brock Bowers. You have Michael Mayer, who is also a very good tight end. So if you're going to be running out 11 as much as they did, and I think they did that much more earlier in the game, why not have Mayer on the field a little more? Rarely am I ever going to say you should be taking Brock Bowers off the field. And I know that was a very big preseason discussion. I think if you followed a lot of fantasy people with, Michael Mayer was playing in a lot of 11 personnel sets in the preseason. But if Bowers was not going to be the type of impact player that we know, and he was just kind of be a decoy, but wasn't really decoying anything, because I think, like you said, anytime they did look like they took a shot down the field to, I think, Thornton twice, he was always double covered. There was always some kind of cloud over him too. So it wasn't really like there was a lot of options. So again, I just don't think the Chargers were scared of anything. To go back 15 passes defense, the Chargers defense had. It just seems like everything they thought that was going to come, they were ready for it.
Yeah, a couple of interceptions, or 3 interceptions for Geno Smith in this game. One on an RPO, it looked like, on the first snap of the game, if I'm not mistaken, where it gets tipped and then caught on the bounce. The third interception, they're playing Tampa 2. Derwin James is running the pull against the seam route. He tips it up. Another interception, 2 deflections leading to picks. You mentioned the 11 personnel thing, and I find that so interesting because they ran 11 on 51 of 65 snaps in this game. So 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 tight end, nearly 80% of the time, with a 31% success rate, which, if you don't know success rate, let me tell you, that is bad. You do not want to have a 31% success rate. It was not working for the Raiders, in this game. And yet, like you said, Michael Mayer plays 35% of the snaps. Brock Bowers about 75% of the snaps in this game. If there was ever a week to lean into more Michael Mayer in 11 personnel, Dan, you're correct, it would have been this week. And yet the Chargers, or the Raiders, after leaving Brock Bowers on the bench early on in week 1 against the Patriots in those 11 personnel groupings, decide this is the week to do it, where he's not really even getting the ball in those spots. Just very curious from Chip Kelly.
Yeah, and then I think when you think of what the tight end impact has in blocking, the Chargers were not making that easy on the offensive line either, with their blitzes and the sim pressures from a whole bunch of different personnel looks. So the Chargers really made that as difficult as possible, and I don't think the Raiders did anything on their part to lessen that on what they had to try to do on offense either.
Yeah, Ashton Jeanty, 11 carries for 43 yards in this game. And, I mean, frankly, I know that next gen is going to have a negative 25 rush yards over expectation. That is a lie. He did a great job given the circumstances. I wouldn't be shocked if there were guys in the backfield or at the line of scrimmage who were unblocked on 8, 9 of those 11 carries. It's sort of damning of the decision to take him because, of course, they sort of feel like if you don't have the offensive line or the offensive concepts that can make that running back's life easier, he's not going to be able to transcend that. And yet, at the same time, you can sort of see, like, oh man, this guy would be great if he just had anything in the way of blocking. And it's only been 2 weeks. I don't want to make a broader proclamation after 2 weeks, but it just felt like he had no hope of succeeding or thriving in this game, in the run game. And I frankly would have liked to see him more involved in the receiving game, and yet we got like Dylan Laube in the 2-minute drill. Is this really the best usage of your personnel, your transcendent star players, given how they're reacting, how they're feeling in week 2? Is this really the right way to use them?
Yeah, that was my question too. And especially coming off of week 1, where I was really excited of what this offense did. And it was kind of the same thing in the run game, where the Patriots were just in the backfield at all times. Jeanty did not have a lot of room to run. And that was my concern about the Raiders specifically being the team to take Jeanty, because it did not seem like this offensive line was going to be the one really set up well to get the most out of a running back in that situation. So I'd still have a little bit of concern there. But I'm really intrigued to like kind of know just what their game plan was, because even going back to the Patriots game, the play action they were using, that was helping the offensive line too, because that was helping them be a little more aggressive and moving forward, kind of do the pseudo pass blocking off play action, and they were so good at that, and they really were not able to get that going at all, and they were doing that last week without a good run game, but this week they just were not able to do it at all, especially as they were trailing. So I think that put them in a bunch of straight drop back situations that made it harder, and then you're not really establishing the run in that way either. So it's just things just compounded on top of each other for the Raiders. And again, like I said, I don't think they were doing anything to make it easier on themselves with the way they went about it.
Yeah, game script, game situation goes a long way, I think, in helping make play action's life easier. Neither of these teams ran the football well whatsoever in this game, but Geno Smith, 6 of 9 for 36 yards and a pick on play action. Justin Herbert, 7 of 10 for 135 and 2 touchdowns and no picks off of play action in this game. And none of that was establishing the run. All of that was just, do you have a quarterback who's making good throws? And are you in a situation where the other team is scared of you, or at least worried that you're going to try and run the football and do so with a reasonable level of success? I don't want to keep dwelling on Chip, but I keep coming back to him. Like, I just feel like this offense, people were understandably excited after what they saw from him at Ohio State, expecting kind of a more modern rushing attack, creating some opportunities for them to, work play action off of a variety of different run concepts, and saw it in week 1, didn't see it as much this week. I guess I sort of wonder, like, do you think this was just a 1-week aberration, or do you think this is just a combination of a great defense and some bad luck and a game script that didn't work out all that well? Like what do you think the lasting effects are of this for the Raiders?
Yeah, I'm going to lean more into it was the worst offense to play given the situation they had themselves in with Bowers that wasn't 100% healthy. So I'm going to give a lot of credit to the Chargers defense here, because again, they played really well. They were doing a lot of just funky stuff, either in their sims or how they had the coverage coming in the back end, and the defensive backs were just, again, all over everything. So I think it was a little bit of the worst of all worlds. So I'm going to give it another week before I panic, especially since I did like so much of what they did in week 1. So it's half and half. So I'm not ready to completely hit the panic button that they don't really know what they're doing. And we're going to have another Geno Smith game like this. I really don't expect him to play this poorly again. This might have been the worst game we've seen of Geno in like this iteration of Geno Smith. So I'm not expecting them to have this poor of an offensive performance again.
Yeah, I mean, the post-Russ trade era when Geno's been a starter in Seattle and now in Las Vegas, this was his worst start, to me, by a considerable margin. It's funny you mentioned the sim pressure stuff. I mean, that worked so well. The blitzes did not work well. Geno was 6 of 6 for 71 yards against the blitz. He was 18 of 37 for 109 with 3 interceptions when he was not blitzed, which does include those sim pressures where the Chargers are sending 4, but just sending them from sort of a, sending them from different locations or dropping guys off the line and overloading one side of the line, various stuff, but without, sort of maintaining 7-man coverages. I just thought the Chargers defensive backs were awesome in this game. I thought that Derwin James was maybe the best player on the field. Just a great defensive performance from a great defensive team. And yet, Dan, I found it so funny that we are not going to think about how the Chargers handled the second half of this game for more than 5 seconds over the rest of the season. It is going to be lost to the winds of time. And yet, was this not, like, by the definition of people who say the Chargers are chargering, was this not a chargering from the Chargers offense in the second half of this game? They have a 4th and 1 at midfield, and they try a jet sweep to Darius Davis, who does not have a touch all game. He fumbles it, and they end up not, I don't know if they recovered it, but either way, they did not convert 4th and 1. They kick a 20-yard field goal after succeeding on 4th and 2 earlier on the drive, and then going forward and 4th and 1 later on. The Raiders give them the ball back, and they immediately, Omarion Hampton fumbles the ball away on an exchange. I think Herbert got credited with eventually, but basically, it just felt like they were one special teams blunder away from like every classic Chargers disaster loss, but it just didn't matter because the defense was so good.
Yeah, and I think that's I think the difference of what this Chargers team might be that they'll have a little bigger buffer, a little higher margin for error than they would be, in. I think we remember the meme of Phillip Rivers always getting the ball down by one score on the final drive. So if they don't have to be doing that, if it takes two-score lead to blow in a way, then I think that'll help. But yeah, man, I didn't even really clock it, like watching in real time, and it wasn't great. But they traded field goals to start the second half, and then downs, interception, punt, downs, fumble, downs, end of game. Those were all the offensive drives for both teams. So yeah, we did not get a lot of great football, at least offensively, coming in that second half. And the Chargers tried to give it away, but I think the Raiders tried a little harder.
They succeeded a little harder. Herbert, had that one incredible throw to Quentin Johnston for a touchdown. Some scrambles that I thought were pretty good. Some mixed stuff here and there. Had a dropped interception that was horrific in the second half, which again will be lost to history. If you're going to grade his performance, where do you think he lands for performance in week 2?
I'm still going to give it like a B, just because of how good those good throws were, and just how comfortable I think he looks in the pocket right now. And I think I'm going to add in Greg Roman here, because this has been a more pass-heavy offense than I think a Greg Roman offense has been given credit for, even going back to last year. And I know there was a lot of talk of that last week when they were so pass-heavy. But structurally, I think even going back to Baltimore, this is the most wide open I've ever seen his passing concepts. Where it doesn't seem like it is a struggle to create space, which it so often did with the Chargers last year, with the Baltimore so often. That's what we always talked about with Lamar Jackson. It seems like the route concept and the spacing really working for this offense, and Herbert trusts it. He's able to sit back in the pocket a little more. Like you said, he's scrambling more often, which I think does help open up the offense, brings in some defenders too, which then opens up some more holes. So I think it did definitely peter out a little bit in the second half, but I think just based on what they showed in the first half and what we saw week 1, what I think this offense is kind of shaping into, I'm still going to grade it a little bit higher. I'll say it was a solid B. I still came away impressed with what Herbert did.
Yeah, the one throw was spectacular, and if you can do that, it's a lot easier to find a few more short completions and here and there, as opposed to finding the guy who can throw 60 yards on a rope, and had a couple other great throws in this game as well. And I think they'll be better once they do theoretically get the run game going, like the one classic Greg Roman trope of he will find ways to get the run game working. I do think they will eventually figure it out, but certainly it's been a bit of a slog through 2 weeks with Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris. Otherwise, I feel like we pretty much covered that game. Khalil Mack's elbow injury. I'm still waiting to see what the reports are as we record this. Certainly did not look good. He was in a sling on the sideline. Do you feel like, Khalil Mack is a legendary player, certainly still an impactful player last year. Do you think that's a situation where they have to address that by going out and getting somebody to replace him if he is out for an extended period of time, or can they get by with Tuli Tuipulotu and Khalil Mack, and Bud Dupree? Do you think that's something where they need another guy if Mack's out for a while?
Yeah, they might be able to get away with it, maybe just depth-wise. Obviously, I don't think you're adding impact pass rusher at this point in the offseason. I'm not even sure offhand, who the free agents are, especially with Clowney signing. I think it is going to be it's definitely a loss in the run game. I think more often it will probably be harder to fill what he does just in terms of how he plays positionally on the edge if he is out for, a significant amount of time. But kind of like we saw, even after, he went out, this pressures they were able to get, some of the free rushers they were still able to draw up, they'll probably have to lean on that a little more, which is probably not the way you want to live if you're the Chargers. But I do think they probably have the ability to, to create some pressure with the guys that they have kind of all over the defense too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearly they have defensive backs they feel very comfortable setting after the quarterback day, and Henley had a great game and finished up with who's spying, I believe, Geno Smith, and then came in for a sack to basically close out this game. We will close out this game, move on to Bucs Texans. Tampa Bay Buccaneers 20, Houston Texans 19. Second week in a row, we get a Baker Mayfield wild 2-minute drill to win the game. He converts a 4th down by scrambling away from a free rusher and scrambling for a 1st down, and eventually they get a touchdown. I believe with 9 seconds to go to clinch a victory over the Houston Texans. This was a weird one. I mean, it really was disjointed, I think, for significant stretches. There was great play from the defensive lines, and I really came out of it not feeling any different about either team than I did coming in, even though it, was competitive. It was very close. Clearly, either of these teams could have won. I mean, there were a couple of, very narrow things here that decided this game, but I'll just start on the Bucs side of things. Do they feel a little lucky to you that they've started 2-0? Does this feel like a 2-0 team to you? Do they feel like they have a sustainable sort of formula given what you've seen from them through 2 weeks?
Sustainable? No. I think they'll probably have to figure some things out, but I do think they have enough going on that I think they're potentially well-rounded enough that it's going to, they can have something if something else isn't working. Because I think, you watch that run game, the way they were able to kind of to lean on that. I think the backs had a 63% success rate, which is incredible against that defensive line. I think, using that defensive line against their aggressiveness against them a little bit.
Right.
And I think we saw that with some of the screens too that they did in the passing game. So it was nice that I think they found answers because, you were already working with Barton at a left tackle, and then Gadecki goes out, and you have to switch him. And I think we saw a complete shift in the game plan of what they were how they were trying to attack Houston once that happened. So the fact that I think at least offensively they had some answers and were able to change things up kind of on the fly makes me optimistic about what they potentially can do. But yeah, you're probably not going to want to do 2 game-winning drives in back-to-back weeks. I know, the two of us are going to say that's not a very sustainable, way to play.
Fun though.
It is.
Losing, they already lost Tristan Wirfs heading into this game. He's out for first 4 weeks of the year, and then you lose Gadecki as well. I mean, that's one of the best tackle combinations in football, maybe the best, depending on how you feel about maybe Buffalo or a couple other teams. That is the strength of your team, and now you're facing maybe the best edge rushing duo in football, and Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, who were great in this game, made plays all over the place in this game. It wasn't like those guys didn't show up. So impressed with how they managed that situation. I know they didn't score a ton of points, and they scored 20 points, but just the running game getting going, it felt like you said they had answers in the screen game. Baker made stuff happen. He improvised for things. The one thing I will say offensively that I was hoping to see that I didn't really get to see as this game wore along, and I was surprised they did not get to more often, was Mike Evans. And it seemed like they were sort of resigned to, okay, we're going to line up Mike Evans in the boundary against Derek Stingley, and he's going to get him or not get him. And a couple times he got him. He had that one fade for a big gain, but 39 reps for Mike Evans, 5 catches, 56 yards on 11 targets. Was sort of hoping we'd see him in the slot as the game wore on, just to get him away from Stingley, because I don't think they're going to put Stingley in the slot, and it just felt like they never really got to that solution or didn't get to it often enough to make Baker's life easier.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting things. It did seem like they were just going to, let them go one-on-one and be their best. I think, let's look for next-gen stats here. He was on him for 29 of Evans' 39 routes. Stingley was on Evans, and only 3 catches for 36 yards when those two were matched up against each other. So yeah, I would like to see them move around their guys a little more. That was the same thing. I was kind of interested in what they would be doing with Ibuka too, because in week 1, he played 50-50 slot and outside, but had basically all of his production outside. So I'm really interested to see what they're going to do, with that slot role, until Chris Godwin, potentially comes back. And I think that's something that they still kind of need to figure out. Obviously, I think they have the touchdown to Miller. And I think what Aikman said, that wasn't his first read. And I was like, yeah, if Baker's throwing a touchdown to Miller in the end zone, I can pretty much guarantee that was not his first read on that play. But yeah, I think they're still trying to figure out the best combination of what they have at receiver and how to best use those guys. They probably feel the best with Evans outside, but I think they can try to figure out, be a little more creative in the slot too.
Yeah, I just, as the game wore on, because they were so responsive and reactive in other ways, just seemed like maybe something I would expect them to have tried. But I went back to watch Untitled 22. Maybe they just did it a bunch and he just wasn't getting open and I missed it, but didn't seem like he was getting away from Stingley very often. I will say, I mean, the Baker did make that big play at the end on 4th down to extend this game. Is it fair to say he's like maybe the most underrated scrambler in the league? I know that we have other guys who who've gotten, like Patrick Mahomes is the classic one where like he has now gotten deservedly a ton of credit for his scrambling ability. It just feels like Baker is so good at picking up 3rd and long, 4th and long situations with his legs, and in the open field, like he's going to juke somebody. Like he is going to find an open lane. He's so good at it, and he has done it so often in these 2-minute situations.
Yeah, and I mean, can we just quickly talk about the scramble before that, where he kind of runs into? It looks like he takes a path to run into CJ Gardner-Johnson, and then I went from Baker just like broke his leg to him like just getting up and being in Gardner-Johnson's face in a way that just looked like he was absolutely fine. So that was that was the most, I think, Baker Mayfield scramble that could have been possible. So yeah, he's a very good scrambler. Usually knows when to scramble. I think we don't think of him that way because I think he has in the past just kind of fled from the pocket when he shouldn't. In other situations, I think over the past like 2 years, he's gotten much better at that. So the scrambles are a little more controlled now. So I think we used to kind of take some of those bad sacks that he would take when he shouldn't have been leaving the pocket. But now with that more control that he has in the pocket that he's kind of found, he knows where to go. He knows how to make like one guy miss usually. And it's like just enough. Yeah, it's kind of in that Patrick Mahomes, like he'll usually get just enough.
Yeah, I mean, great point. And the big difference to me is where he's leaving the pocket. I mean, when he was with the Browns, he was almost always escaping out the back of the pocket to the side. And it got to the point where edge rushers were waiting for him when he did it. Like they were looping around knowing he was going to get there. Now, when he escapes, it's so often vertical. It is so often I am going straight ahead. I am escaping out of the pocket and I have one linebacker I have to beat and I'm going to beat that guy 9 times out of 10. And that is great. I will agree with you. I was hooting and hollering at the Baker Mayfield, CJ Gardner-Johnson debate. That needed to be mic'd up. I'm hoping we get audio of it. They could have stopped the game for a half hour and had a verbal debate. And I would have been delighted. 2 of the ultimate shit talkers in the NFL getting a chance to finally meet on the same page. Flipping it to the Texans side of things. Do you feel like they blew this? I mean, obviously, whenever you blow a late lead or have a late lead and lose the game, you might blow it. But do you feel like this game was really there for the taking for them and they kind of just let the Bucs off the hook or left the door open for them? Like, what do you think? If you're the Texans, do you feel like this was a game you should have won?
Yeah, I think you definitely. I think you probably should have, especially with kind of how poorly they played, throughout the game. It just feels like. Feels a lot of the same with the Houston offense along the offensive line. It's consistently just 3rd and long. Again, can't establish the run, until Nick Chubb breaks that long one late in the game. I think he had, a long of like 8 yards. And the rest of them were, 1 or 2 yard runs. So it's 11
for 18 before that run.
Yeah, that's a tough way to live, and they are continuing to do that. I think Houston was a little better, picking up some of the the defensive line. I think they were better at, and then Tampa started, sending some more sims, some more delayed blitzes, and I think that screwed them up a little bit. But then, you have that drive, and you get down there, and the having the rollout on 4th down, I think there was just that entire sequence. It's just like, what are we trying to accomplish here? Like you're down there, just you have to have better plays than that. I kind of understand the 3rd down fade a little bit to Nico because that was open. You just kind of missed the throw. The 4th down, the rollout to his left side. I don't know. And
sprint option left.
Yeah. It's tough.
It's tough, and it's like, on one hand, I want to say, okay, like, you do not trust your run game, and you should not trust your run game. Totally understand that, but just seems so strange that it's so much success isolating Nico Collins in space, getting him latched up against somebody where they feel like they have a mismatch. It just, I think about like, and it's not fair because he's not perfect either. I'm like, okay, what would Kevin O'Connell do in this spot? Like, is he going to try and bring somebody in motion next to Justin Jefferson and high-low a cornerback with him? Or is he going to put Justin Jefferson on one side of the field by himself and give him space to work with and trust that he's going to get open and that whoever his quarterback is, Carson Wentz at this point, God, Jesus, is going to get a catchable ball in Justin Jefferson's way? It just felt like Collins had success. He had a completion in the slot earlier on the drive to set them up in the first and goal situation. He gets open on the third down double move and CJ misses the throw. It just, it just didn't feel like there was a lot of faith, weirdly, in the guys who should be the players you have faith in that moment. And I really think I was coming into the season expecting things to be a little different. I wasn't expecting the offensive line to be good, but I was expecting them to have better answers for sim pressures and for blitzes. I wasn't expecting as many mental mistakes. I wasn't expecting the same sort of protection breakdowns on a drive-by-drive basis. And I was definitely at least hoping that CJ Stroud was not going to have to hit a 2nd and 12 or a 3rd and 11 every single series. And then, through 2 games, it is exactly the same as it was last year. With like 4 new offensive linemen and a new OC, it does not matter. It is exactly the same, and that is infuriating to me in terms of what they're doing with CJ Stroud. Yeah,
it's tough, and you can see it's impacting him also.
Of course, how could it not?
Yeah, and I think the way he's playing, some of the passes that he has, just a little sped up, and I think missing things that we didn't see him miss during his rookie season. And again, I think the offensive line in a vacuum, like I was more optimistic about it this week than I was last week until Tampa started really turning up the heat with some of the stuff. But that was some of the things that the Rams did last week too. I think they were the amount that they were stunting and forcing the Texans to make some protections and move around. And I think like that's what you're going to see now, because you kind of have this reputation of a team that cannot communicate along the offensive line. You're not able to pass stuff off as much. So teams are going to test that even more. And when it gets through, I think those are harder to block and harder to figure out what to do after. So it's tough. I think looking at early numbers, 50% pressure rate for CJ Stroud, which I mean, that might, those numbers might be updated by the time this goes up, but not good.
Even doesn't feel wrong,
right? It does not. So yeah, that's just it's a tough way to live, and I don't think we're going to see anything that's sustainable in that way, no matter what Stroud does, until those can do. And it's it's still an offensive wide thing, right? It's not just him. It's like you said, being in 2nd and 3rd and long, like we've seen for the past 2 years. It's hard to ask your quarterback to consistently bail you out, because there's maybe 1 or 2 on the planet that could, and we've seen those teams do everything in their power to make them not have to do that. And then we just kind of saw the Texans grab every spare offensive lineman from offensive lines that were not good last year to come in, and we kind of thought it was going to be different, and it turns out it is not.
Yeah, and CJ Stroud can do it. He just can't do it every single drive.
Yeah.
Like, if he has to do it 3 or 4 times a drive, that's not a sustainable way to live. And to your point, like, it goes back to the run game as well, because one of the ways to get people out of those sim pressures, one of the ways is to block them up and hit things behind them. One of the other ways is to run the ball effectively and be in 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4. And they can't be as exotic. They have to acknowledge a threat of the run. They have to be more disciplined up front, because they know if you can run the ball in that situation, that's fundamentally changing the stuff they can call. And so it just feels like we're now sitting here 2 weeks into the season, and I'm already thinking, okay, well, what can they do in 2026 to make CJ Stroud's life easier? And that's not fair. Like, this is one of the best young quarterbacks in football, and it feels like he has been failed now in consecutive off seasons by this front office. in terms of giving him what he needs to thrive. And last year, you make the case, okay, well, they were getting a bunch of injured guys back. They felt good about a bunch of their young draft picks. Bobby Slowick was like the hot young coordinator candidate. They went out and instead added playmakers. Nobody had any issue with them adding playmakers, even though the offensive line ended up being the true disaster for that team. You knew that there was a mess up front. You knew that they were having trouble with protections if you were Nick Caserio. And they look exactly the same in all the infuriating ways as they did last season. And that has to be so disheartening, not just if you're a Texans fan, but also if you're just CJ Stroud himself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's tough, and I don't think there's a lot of help elsewhere where you're trying to get around some of the offensive line issues. Like we've seen teams build offenses around knowing their offensive line is going to be bad and have problems. And, having it be so hard to get Nico Collins involved through 2 weeks is kind of like my red flag for what this offense potentially is. He comes... The thing that you said was, comes from the Rams, going to bring some of that offense. The Rams are spamming their best receivers, no matter who it is. They're getting, 45% target share. And I think Collins did end up getting, 9 targets, but they all seemed hard. And then he wasn't really involved last week either. So the fact that they're not really able to figure out how to do that, have some, easy buttons in this offense, because we kind of know things probably aren't going to go as we drew them up. But to, have someone like Nico Collins and not just have him be an answer on some of these plays where a blitz is going to come, when we might expect pressure. That's a tough thing for me. And, some of these other younger guys I think are fun too. So the fact that the passing offense still feels difficult is very disheartening.
Yeah, we saw a big punt return from Jalen Noel, who, you would figure they could use a bit more speed and a bit more athleticism around Collins in the passing game. We saw, I think, a Jaden Higgins catch. It's not like this is a talentless team. I think Nico Collins is a legit superstar, tremendous number one wide receiver who you could use with a 40% target share and still thrive on offense. But it's not just throwing him low percentage targets. It's moving him around. It's getting him advantageous spots. It's using motion and stacks and rubs and all the things Sean McVay does to make it so Puka Nacua is in position to get a 40% target share, or Cooper Kupp a couple of years ago was in position to get a crazy target share. And I was hoping for more from Nick Caley, and so far don't really see that. 3 play action dropbacks in this game for CJ Stroud, and maybe it's that, we don't, they're not scared of the run and we don't trust our tackles to pass protect, but whether you're booting him, whether you're doing something to make his life easier, it just doesn't feel like you said, there's no easy button here for CJ Stroud and the Texans. It feels like so much falls on his shoulders each and every week from drive to drive, and it's just hard to live that way and hard to thrive that way. You're going to get a couple drives where he looks great and he pulls it off, but you're not going to get 6 of them or 7 of them. And, with someone like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, you're going to get games where they get 6 or 7 drives where they are dominating you because they can do so many different things.
Yeah, and this Tampa Bay defense is kind of one of the things you figured you can probably pick on their secondary too, at least the quarterbacks, right? And the fact that you weren't, the line's probably going to be an issue. Todd Bowles is probably going to want to blitz you quite a bit, but you should have the advantage with some of their corners. And to your point on Nico Collins, looks like 44 total snaps, 33 out wide, only 11 in the slot. So it's just not a lot of moving them around, trying to just change up those looks, and it's tough. Like I just kind of want a little more. We're kind of hoping we'd just get a little more from this offense through week 2.
So Texans 0-2 in the AFC South. The Colts, of course, after their last second victory over the Broncos, start 2-0. Jags are 1-1. They were almost 2-0 before things went very south there for them late in that game. Do you feel like at this point the Texans are no longer the favorites to win the AFC South?
I feel like you kind of...
You don't sound too confident.
Well, I still have confidence in them because this defense, I think, is probably going to keep them in a lot of games. Again, like
sure.
this offense was playing very poorly for most of this game, and the fact that they were still able to hang around and have that chance at the end, I think the defense is going to be good enough to do that. But when you're 0-2, when you already have a team that's 2-0 in the division, like I think that's tough. So in terms, it's going to be close again through 2 weeks. Don't want to make too many grand proclamations, but I think the 2-0, the 0-2, and kind of how that 0-2 has happened. Luckily, it hasn't been any divisional games yet, so there's still a little bit. But yeah, I probably wouldn't consider them the favorites right now based on how both the Colts and the Texans are playing.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't feel like they are about to go off and be a totally different team than the team we saw last year. And last year, that team won the division or made a playoff spot because they were much better than the teams in the AFC South, and the AFC South was a disaster. If the AFC South is better, and the Colts look much better than they did last year, and Jacksonville looks better, and much better, but well, yeah, I would say much better. They were terrible last year. The Jags look better than they did last year as well. Suddenly, you can't just rely on winning 5 games in the AFC South to be a playoff team. And so I do think something has to give here. I don't think they can win the division playing at the level they did last year, and it feels like they're playing at almost the exact level they did last year, and getting worse results, unfortunately, as a consequence of that sort of mediocre level of play. But like you said, 2 weeks into the year, the Bucs could be 0-2. Like the Bucs are like 2 plays away from being 0-2, and yet they are 2-0 in the NFC South. Very slim margins for some of these teams here as we finish up. Dan, where can people check out your excellent analysis and insight into the other 28 teams in the NFL?
Yeah, socials are probably the easiest way to do it, where I post everything there. Dan Pizzuta on Blue Sky, we're doing mostly, but pretty much anywhere. It's Dan Pizzuta. I'm the only one, so that's nice. It helps. I have a newsletter now that goes out. Again, I said this for the first time out loud last week, and it was definitely a mistake. Snaps and stats .ghost.io. Not the most friendly verbal thing to say. Looks much better in a link. So yeah, just follow on socials and click the links.
Can you change the name after 2 weeks? Is that an option for you?
I should probably look into it, because if I'm going to have to continue to say it out loud, I probably should.
I think it's fine. The name is fine. The content is excellent. Dan is one of the best people covering the NFL. There's a reason you see him on all of Mina's podcasts and the Athletic Football Show last week and all of our podcasts. Dan is super insightful and smart and a great follow on social media as well. So check out Dan's newsletter. Check him out on social media. And Dan, thanks so much for staying up late and breaking down these 2 games.
Absolutely, Bill. Anytime.